Over the last few days, a series of high-stakes, behind-the-scenes meetings have taken place that could, and this is no exaggeration, completely change the world as we know it. We're talking about a potential redrawing of the global map. It all comes down to two summits, two presidents, and two totally different stories about what actually happened. Okay, let's get into it. And that right there is Donald Trump. A really blunt statement from inside the Oval Office that pretty much signals a massive earthquake in American foreign policy. But to really get how we ended up here and what those words truly mean, we have to look at the meeting where he said them. So, the first act in this whole global drama kicks off in Washington, D.C. It was supposed to be a straightforward one-on-one meeting, but well, it turned into something way, way bigger. That's right. Just as President Zelenskiga shows up at the White House, so does this surprise group of Europe's heaviest hitters. We're talking France, Germany, the UK, the whole crew. I mean, think about that for a second. This was not on the schedule. They just appeared. Their sudden arrival tells you everything you need to know about the sheer panic that was starting to ripple through Europe. They were terrified of what was decided a few days earlier, thousands of miles from them. So, what on earth could have happened that would make Europe's most powerful leaders basically crash a White House meeting? To figure that out, we've got to rewind the tape just 3 days to a super symbolic summit that was held completely in secret. And this all went down incredibly fast. Just look at this timeline. On August 15th, you've got Trump and Putin meeting. For the next 2 days, the entire world is just guessing, trying to piece together what they could have possibly agreed on. And then it all blows up on August 18th with that showdown in Washington. But the real key to this whole thing is right there at the beginning. Alaska. You know, choosing Alaska was pure political theater, and it was brilliant. This was once Russian land sold to the U.S. It's America's front line in the Arctic. But you want to know the most important part? It's pretty much halfway between Moscow and Washington, and very, very far from Brussels or Paris. The message couldn't have been clearer. This is a conversation between the two big powers, and Europe, you're not invited. And inside that meeting, a little moment kind of revealed the huge shift that was happening. A story leaked out that the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, actually wore a sweater with CCP, the Russian letters for the USSR, on it. Putin apparently joked, Sergei is an imperialist. Now, yeah, it's a joke, but it perfectly captures the new vibe Russia was putting out there. Confident, assertive, and there to negotiate as an equal, not some pariah. And this is where it all gets really interesting. Because after that meeting in Alaska, two completely opposite stories emerged. Was it a total failure, a nothing burger, or was it some kind of masterclass in diplomatic strategy? It really just depends on who you talk to. At first, the European media and a lot of politicians just kind of shrugged it off. The summit wrapped up with no big announcement, no immediate ceasefire. The general feeling was, the mountain birthed a mouse. All this hype for nothing. It was just a big photo op. Commentators all over Europe were saying Trump got played. They painted him as this amateur who walked into a room with a master strategist like Putin and just got completely outmaneuvered. But what if that wasn't what was going on at all? Because a totally different way of looking at it started to bubble up. This other perspective argues that what went down in Alaska wasn't a failure in the slightest. Actually, according to this view, it was a genius strategic move, a way to end the war by just completely changing the rules of the game. Okay, so here is the absolute key to understanding this. For years, the Western approach, especially in Europe, has been framed as this moral battle, right? It's democracy versus autocracy, it's good versus evil. But by meeting with Putin as an equal, analysts say Trump just ripped that moral argument out of the equation entirely. He switched American policy from this moral doctrine to the cold, hard logic of the Kissinger doctrine, something called realpolitik. And this is why Europe panicked. Their whole argument for keeping the war going, for spending hundreds of billions, was built on that moral high ground. But if the United States, their biggest ally, suddenly isn't talking about good versus evil anymore, and is instead just talking about national interests and balancing power, what's Europe's argument now? All of a sudden, their entire position looks like it's built on sand. And this isn't just about changing a few words in a press release. No. This is about a whole new global settlement that Russia has apparently been pushing for, with huge stakes for the entire world map. So, just so we're all on the same page, what exactly is realpolitik? Basically, it's foreign policy with all the emotion and ideology stripped away. You're just looking at a map and asking, what's practical? What keeps us safe? What creates a stable balance of power? It has nothing to do with who's the good guy or the bad guy, and that is the new lens for this whole deal. So what would this deal actually involve? Well, according to the reports, these are Russia's main demands, and they are massive. We're talking about full Russian control of the Donbass, Ukraine staying permanently neutral, so no NATO ever, and the world officially recognizing Crimea as part of Russia. Plus, all sanctions gone. This isn't just a ceasefire. It's a complete redesign of security in Eastern Europe. And you can just imagine the position this puts President Zelensky in. It's an absolutely impossible trap. He's getting pressure from the US to cut a deal based on this new, cold logic. He's getting pressure from his European allies to keep up the old moral fight. And then, back at home, he's facing threats from hardliners who basically said any leader who gives up an inch of land is a traitor. So why should any of this matter to the rest of us? Because what's really being discussed here isn't just the future of one country. It's about potentially tearing down the whole rules-based international order that's more or less run things since the Cold War ended. This is a conversation about what the new rules are going to be, and more importantly, who gets to write them. The events of just these past few days have put everything up in the air. The old alliances are cracking, the old arguments don't work anymore, and the entire world is kind of holding its breath, wondering if we're watching the birth of a brand new, maybe more practical, and maybe more dangerous global order. The only real question left is, what comes next?